Something happened in the last 24 hours that most crypto media completely buried, and once you hear it, you'll understand why nobody wants to talk about it loudly yet. A former CFTC official just said something on camera that should have been the lead story everywhere. She said the industry has roughly 2.5 years to become too big to fail. Not millions, not billions, not even trillions. She used the word quadrillions. And once that scale of money moves in, there's no putting it back. Stablecoins aren't going away. Bitcoin as an asset class isn't going away. And once digital assets sit inside every brokerage account in America, you cannot undo that. Stay with me because that statement is just the opening. What's happening behind it is bigger. Right now, tonight, the Senate is holding emergency last-minute meetings to push the Clarity Act across the finish line. This is the bill that defines how digital assets get regulated in the United States. Senator Haggerty has pointed toward the end of July as the target. The White House has floated July 4th. Negotiations restart this week. And here's the part that matters most. The people pushing this aren't doing it because they love crypto. They're doing it because the last election taught them a lesson. The party that lost the presidency lost it in part because they were seen as hostile to this entire industry. Nobody wants to walk into a midterm having repeated that mistake. So the pressure is real. The timeline is real. And the incentive to get this done before voters go to the polls again is about as strong as political incentive gets. But here's where it gets interesting. While everyone's eyes are on the Senate, there's a second story running in parallel, one that doesn't need Congress to do anything at all. The DTCC, the institution that clears and settles roughly $3.7 quadrillion every single year, is 24 days away from a soft launch with 50 financial firms. Ripple Prime is one of them. Now, I want to be precise about what this means. I am not telling you that price moves in 24 days. What I am telling you is that the machinery that eventually moves price starts turning in 24 days. And the DTCC has confirmed it publicly. Here's the detail almost nobody is talking about. The SEC has already granted the DTCC a no-action letter. That means the DTCC does not need the Clarity Act to pass to begin settling with digital assets. The legislation would help. It would accelerate things. But the DTCC already has the green light to start tokenizing regardless. And in 4.5 months, the plan is to tokenize the remaining $115 trillion sitting inside that system. Think about what that actually means. The largest clearinghouse on Earth is not waiting for politicians. It's already moving. Now let's go back almost a decade because something just happened that gave me chills. There's an old interview with one of Ripple's senior executives, recorded years ago, long before any of this was front-page material. In it, he was asked directly, how do you plan to release the rest of the XRP supply? And his answer, at the time, sounded almost evasive. He said he wasn't sure they'd ever release all of it. He compared it to oil. He said the largest governments in the world hold oil reserves that never get distributed either. Then he said something that, listening to it now, sounds less like speculation and more like a roadmap. He said XRP might end up functioning as a lender of last resort. That's the exact phrase used to describe what central banks do. Then he was asked whether Ripple might need to restructure as something different than a typical software company. His answer? Maybe a different kind of organization altogether. Maybe something like a national bank charter. That interview is nearly 10 years old. Today, Ripple, alongside BitGo, Fidelity Digital Assets, Circle, and Paxos, has already been awarded a conditional national trust bank charter. Today, Ripple Prime exists, connected to G Treasury, connected to what used to be Hidden Road. Today, a senior executive at Ripple Prime was asked point blank what assets they handle as collateral, and the answer was Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, stablecoins, and tokenized money market funds, explicitly described as the next step toward tokenizing anything of value for settlement and margin. A decade-old answer just became today's headline. And here's the piece that ties the escrow question together. There's an ongoing debate in the community about whether Ripple should release XRP faster from escrow, get it all into circulation so supply becomes fully liquid. One well-known commentator argues exactly that. I disagree, and the reasoning matters. If you let every token out into the open market with no structure, you lose the ability to organize liquidity for the institutions that will actually need it. You can't hand a client trying to settle $115 trillion in assets a wallet address and tell them good luck. you need a counterparty. Ripple Prime is built to be exactly that counterparty. And there's a quieter detail buried in all of this. Ripple could, in theory, sell the rights to receive tokens from Escrow before they're even released, meaning entities could already hold claims on future supply without that supply touching the open market yet. Which raises an obvious question. How do we know some of what sits in that escrow isn't already allocated to G20 governments? We've known for years that large, pre-allocated contracts exist. We don't know exactly who holds them, we just know they exist. Now connect that to something else that happened on a stage with the IMF a few years back. Ripple's CEO was asked directly whether the IMF would ever hold crypto assets. The legal representative on stage gave a careful answer. Under current legal frameworks, a country would need to formally adopt a crypto asset as its currency for that conversation to even begin. That sounds like a wall. But listen to what it actually implies. The wall isn't permanent, it's conditional, and conditions change. Here's the broader theory, and I want you to sit with it rather than dismiss it. The US dollar's foundation has shifted before. It was gold, then it became the Petrodollar system, where global oil gets priced and settled in dollars. That arrangement is showing cracks. It's down to roughly 80% of global oil transactions today, not the near total dominance it once had. Something eventually replaces that foundation. The question is, what? Why not something that represents reserves drawn from every sector of the economy, sitting transparently on a public ledger that anyone can verify? We are closer to that becoming real than most people realize. And there's a real possibility the United States moves first. Ripple's leadership has already met with Treasury officials and with the president directly. This isn't fringe anymore. This is happening in rooms with actual decision-making power. So let's connect every thread we just walked through. A former CFTC official says institutional adoption is about to make this industry too big to fail. The Senate is rushing emergency sessions to pass market structure legislation before midterms. The DTCC already has SEC clearance to tokenize without waiting for that legislation. Ripple Prime sits inside the DTCC's 50-firm soft launch. A 10-year-old interview just turned out to be an accurate preview of a national bank charter, a prime brokerage, and a collateral desk that all now exist. 16 official U.S. digital asset commodities are already recognized, and 20 G20 nations already have a stablecoin running on the XRP ledger. None of these are isolated headlines. They are pieces of the same structure, built slowly, in language boring enough that most people scroll right past it. The honest truth is this: legislation or no legislation, the infrastructure is already being assembled. The Clarity Act would accelerate public awareness and confidence. But the DTCC isn't waiting for permission it already has. The question left on the table isn't whether this happens. It's whether the broader market understands what's happening before the shift is already complete, or after. This is not financial advice for me or anyone else. Always do your own research and make your own decisions. If this connected dots for you, share it with someone who needs to see it. Drop a comment telling me whether you think the Clarity Act gets done before July 4th or slips past midterms. I read every one. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it now, because the next video goes straight into what happens in those 24 days before the DTCC's soft launch, and what I found mapping that timeline out is going to surprise you.